My parents took out a third mortgage on our house to support my older sister's business, which ultimately failed. Now, they are asking me to quit college to help them pay off their debt. Currently, it is really late at night, and I'm feeling overwhelmed and frustrated about my situation. I am 19 years old, and I have a sister who is 23 years old. My parents treat her like she is the golden child. They have always made me feel as if I was an afterthought, as if they didn't even want me. Their favoritism has been clear throughout my life, making me feel ignored and unwanted. My sister has always been the focus of their attention, and they often discouraged me from doing anything that might take the spotlight away from her. Honestly, my sister is quite ordinary, and I believe she doesn't excel in any area compared to me. I have always outperformed her in academics, sports, and various activities. I think part of my drive to succeed came from my desire for my parents' love and approval. I tried hard to outshine her because I longed for the affection they so generously showered upon her. Unfortunately, my efforts only made them view me as an attention seeker. By the time I reached high school, I realized that nothing I did would ever make them choose me over her. I gave up trying to win their approval, even though I continued to perform well in school and sports. The difference was that now I was focusing on my own dreams and future rather than their expectations. I believe my sister was also jealous of my achievements. She enjoyed all the attention and praise from our parents, and it must have frustrated her to see that others, unlike our parents, recognized my talents. I tried my best to build a friendship with her, but she was too self-absorbed to reciprocate any kindness. By the time I was preparing for college, I felt distant from my family, and I think we were all relieved to have some space from each other. I started college 2 years ago, majoring in business because entrepreneurship has always interested me. Luckily, I do not have to pay the full tuition due to a scholarship, and my best friend's dad is covering the remaining amount. He understands my family's situation and knew that my parents would never support me financially, especially if it meant I might have a chance to do better than my sister. Thanks to him, I do not need to rely on my parents for money, nor do I have to take out student loans. The scholarship has waived 60% of my tuition, making it easier for my best friend's dad to help with the rest. I am very thankful for his support and plan to pay him back once I can. In the meantime, I am working part-time as a tutor to cover my other expenses. I try to live within my means, but since I live on campus, my accommodation and food costs are taken care of, so I manage to get by. My family has been struggling financially, and my parents had to mortgage jewelry and my grandfather's house 4 years ago to fund their textile business. Although this helped them a bit, their financial situation has not improved much since then. Now, they are in a tight spot, and it is hard for them to cope with their debt. They think I am studying for free because I told them that my tuition is fully covered. They were relieved to know that they wouldn't have to spend any money on my education and could continue to focus on supporting my sister. In the midst of all this, I am trying my best to focus on my studies and create a better future for myself, even as my family dynamics become more complicated. Despite their ongoing struggles, my family is still not achieving the level of success they desire. They have consistently chosen not to include me in their decision-making processes, effectively shutting me out from offering any advice or support. Because of this lack of inclusion, I feel helpless in my ability to assist them. I used to feel extremely anxious about their financial situation and the debts they accumulated. However, that anxiety diminished significantly after I learned that, as I am not a co-signer on their debts, I would not be responsible for paying them off or inherit any of those financial burdens. This realization allowed me to stop worrying about their debts because they do not seem to want my help. I find it unproductive to invest my time and energy in trying to assist those who do not value my insights or recognize my business knowledge. Then, unexpectedly, I received a troubling call from my parents one afternoon. They informed me that my sister was facing some serious problems, and they too were in a difficult situation that required my assistance to pull them out. It turned out that my parents had mortgaged their home nearly a year ago to fund my sister's bakery venture, a business she had little experience in running. My sister lacked a college education and had never truly excelled at baking, so I was baffled by their collective decision to pursue this business idea. They had kept the details of the mortgage from me, and I had never been concerned about how they obtained the money to support her business, so I was blindsided when they revealed the situation. Now, my parents were asking me to return home and take charge of their finances and help manage their business, since my sister had to shut down hers due to lack of profitability. They expected me to immediately transition to a full-time role to assist the family and pull them out of their mess while also contributing to the family business. To my shock, they even suggested that I should consider leaving college altogether to take on these responsibilities. Their approach was so unwaveringly matter-of-fact, as if they thought it was completely reasonable to ask me to give up my college education for their sake. When I questioned them about the rationale behind their expectation, they explained that, as a family member, I had an obligation to help them. They believed that juggling college, the family business, and a second job would be impossible, so quitting school was the most logical option in their minds. They felt that since college kept me away from home, it made it the easiest thing for me to let go of. I was completely taken aback by their casualness in asking me to sacrifice my future for their poor financial decisions. As my dad continued to insist that my sister needed my support and that I was at risk of losing my home if I didn't help, I felt an overwhelming tide of frustration and anger. The audacity of their demands ignited a fire within me, leading me to tell him directly that I owed them nothing. Their current troubles were entirely their own doing, and I no longer saw them as family because they had never truly treated me as such. They had consistently made me feel inadequate, and now that they were desperate for help, they wanted to act like a loving family. In the heat of the moment, my dad argued that even if I didn't want to return out of familial duty, I should at least consider the house I'd called home for my entire life. But to me, that house never felt like a home. It was just a structure where I lived for years, and I made this clear to him before ending the call and blocking my family from reaching me. I had held on to the hope that things might improve with time and that they would transform into decent people. Yet, reality hit me hard, and I realized that day would likely never come. I was exhausted from waiting for them to change, and I felt a heavy weight of negativity settle on my shoulders. As a result, I spent the rest of the day in a terrible mood, choosing not to attend any classes and refraining from talking to anyone. I felt a whirlwind of emotions crashing down on me all at once. I was filled with anger that my parents expected me to sacrifice my future for mistakes they made. At the same time, I felt a strange sense of guilt looming over me for turning my back on them, even though I knew I had the skills to help. I found myself grappling with where this guilt originated and what steps I should take next. It has been a day since I last reflected on my feelings, and I thought by now I might start to feel better, but instead, I still feel terrible. The last time I saw my family was last Christmas, and while I can say we had a decent time together, I personally didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. They weren't picking on me like they usually do, and my sister managed to act civil towards me, which was a nice change. However, looking back, I can't shake the feeling that their kindness was just an act. They probably wanted to keep the peace because they knew they would need my help at some point down the line. This realization makes me feel so strange and even worse about everything. I haven't spoken to anyone about this, not even my best friend, because I find myself at a loss for words and unsure of where to start in sharing my concerns. I guess a big part of why I'm reaching out now is that I really need some reassurance to convince myself that I'm not in the wrong here. I want to believe that I am justified in feeling abandoned by my family when they needed my help, especially after the way they have mistreated me throughout my life. As an update, I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has validated my feelings and reassured me that I am not being selfish in this situation. It means a lot to me. I have been giving this a lot of thought, and I find myself questioning why my parents would ever expect me to help them after everything they have put me through. I can hardly believe that I missed an entire day of classes just because of this drama. That is probably the part one regret the most right now. It's been 3 days since our last interaction, and I still haven't heard from them. I'm honestly not sure what they are up to, and part of me really doesn't care, as long as they leave me alone. I already have enough on my plate to deal with, and I certainly don't need any additional stress from them. I did finally share this situation with my best friend, and she was incredibly sweet and offered to help me out immediately. However, I reassured her that I was okay and didn't need any logistical help at the moment. The only thing I really wanted from her was emotional support and some comforting words to help me navigate through this rough patch. Honestly, my mental health has taken a significant hit since that day. My main concern isn't about my family but rather about my own well-being. I can't shake the thought that I might not have a home to return to once I finish college. I know my friends would be there for me, but I can't shake the feeling that I don't want to constantly rely on them for support. This gives me even more motivation to work twice as hard to ensure that I graduate at the top of my class and secure a good job immediately after college. I can't afford to slack off right now. The anxiety surrounding my future has been overwhelming, and I find it hard to let go, even though I know I can't control what will happen next. All I can do is put in my best effort. I just wish my family wasn't so difficult. As a second update, my family surprised me by showing up at my college today. I was shocked that they had the nerve to come here after everything that has occurred. They said they wanted to take me out for lunch to discuss a few important matters. We met in the lobby, and I didn't want to create a scene in front of my friends, so I reluctantly agreed to go with them, hoping it would get them off my back. I didn't fully trust them, however, so I insisted on choosing the restaurant. I picked a diner I usually go to for a change from cafeteria food. The owners are familiar with me, and I knew I could count on them for support if my family tried anything questionable during our meal. As soon as we arrived, I spotted the owner working at the counter, which put me a bit more at ease. I even waved at him to signal that I was there. Once we were seated, they urged me to order some food. I refused because I just didn't feel like eating with them. I would have rather gone hungry at that moment, but they kept insisting, so I settled on a lemonade without any food. They ordered full meals for themselves, and while we waited for the food to arrive, they finally got to the point of their visit. They wanted to discuss the financial crisis they were facing, something I was already aware of. Once again, they brought up their earlier requests and urged me to reconsider their demands. Earlier, they had asked me about helping with their loans, and yet again, I found myself in the same position of having to explain my decision. I firmly told them that I was not going to quit college to assist them financially. It was frustrating because they had never consulted me or included me in any discussions regarding their financial choices before making those decisions. As a result, I felt it was no longer my responsibility to help. My sister, clearly agitated by my response, accused me of being jealous of her, suggesting that my refusal to assist was rooted in envy. This accusation was laughable. She had nothing in her life that could provoke jealousy in me. In fact, she was the one who had always struggled with insecurities, largely stemming from our dynamic. Many people pointed out that I sounded bitter and resentful in my previous post when mentioning my sister, and I want to address that. Yes, I admit I sounded that way because I am indeed bitter and resentful. She was consistently the favored child, receiving preferential treatment, while I was always overlooked, despite the fact that I felt I deserved recognition for my own achievements. Anyone in my situation would likely feel the same way, if not worse. Eventually, my mother managed to quiet my sister, but not before my parents resorted to emotional blackmail. They began to remind me that the only reason I was able to attend college was due to the education they provided and the support they ensured I had. While that may be true, I felt their reasoning was flawed. They were simply doing the bare minimum expected of them as parents. It was their legal obligation to provide for me, and I did not see it as a favor. I stood my ground, explaining once more that I would not be doing anything for them, and that this was my final stance. I insisted that they should leave, and if they returned, would involve security or the police. My dad appeared furious, almost ready to yell at me, but my mom intervened. She shot me a look filled with disgust and disappointment, saying that they were ashamed of me and that I was a disappointment to them. They left without even waiting for the food they had ordered, and of course, they didn't pay. When I asked about the bill, my sister only glanced back over her shoulder with a smug smile, suggesting that I should cover it since this was my choice of restaurant. Frustration and sadness washed over me. Despite my attempts to maintain composure over the past few days, I could no longer hold it together. My family's behavior had made it clear that they would go to any lengths to make me feel worthless. I felt devastated. My mother's hurtful words echoed in my mind, and the label of disappointment stung deeply. All this was because I chose not to let them push me around. I tried to suppress my emotions, but it became unbearable. After they left, I broke down right there in the diner. It wasn't a quiet moment of sorrow, it was a full-blown emotional meltdown. Tears flowed freely as I hiccuped, and soon, everyone around me was staring. I attempted to leave, but the owner's wife, who knew me, approached my booth. She took my arm gently and guided me behind the counter for a bit of privacy. I didn't resist because I felt lost and didn't know what else to do. Both she and her husband sat with me, comforting me and helping me regain my composure. They took charge of the situation, allowing the other waiters to manage the dining area. I felt immensely grateful for their kindness, especially since I was causing a disturbance in their diner. When they asked me what was wrong, I tried to explain, but the overwhelm made it difficult for me to articulate my thoughts. In the end, I settled for a brief version, mentioning the fight I had with my parents and that they left without paying. They must have sensed that there was more behind my tears but chose not to pry, understanding I was in a fragile state. The owner then offered to pack up all the food they had prepared, assuring me that I wouldn't have to pay for anything. I didn't need to pay for the food, but of course, I planned to pay them back since it was an enormous amount of food they provided. I truly appreciated that they didn't pressure me about it and even took the initiative to call a cab for me, covering the fare out of their own wallets to get me back to college. The kindness and warmth shown by the people in my life have been so crucial. It's one of the main reasons I haven't completely lost my mind yet. Once I returned to my dorm room, I felt the need to reach out to my best friend. I immediately called her, asking if she could connect me with a lawyer as soon as possible to help me with my situation. I explained to her everything that had unfolded that day. The fear I felt came from knowing that if my parents were willing to come all the way to my college just to harass me, there was no telling how much further they might go now that I had already said no to helping them. They were now out of options and could very well increase their efforts to disturb my peace and get under my skin. I knew I had to take action to prevent that from happening, so I involved my best friend in my plan. After hearing about the troubling events of my day, she assured me that she would visit me soon, accompanied by her father and their family lawyer. She told me there was no need for me to worry about anything. This promise brought me a sense of relief because I knew she would be there for me. Even though I felt immense guilt for frequently leaning on her and her dad, I realized I had nowhere else to turn. I was fortunate to have such a wonderful friend who also had an incredible father, someone who was willing to help me in ways my own father never would have. I eagerly anticipated their visit the next day because just being around my best friend was enough to calm my racing thoughts. She has been my friend since kindergarten and knows me better than anyone else. She understands the struggles I face with anxiety and always tries to keep me relaxed. It's as if she's my own personal medicine for anxiety, and I cherish her for that. Her dad is just like her, a fantastic example of what a father should be, which makes me feel even luckier. I often think of them as more family to me than my own parents and sister have ever been. In fact, even the couple who owns the diner where I often eat has shown more kindness to me in the year I've known them than my family ever has. At this point, I can honestly say I hate my family. I wish I had never been born into that household. It's hard to put into words how deeply they have hurt me. I wouldn't even call them greedy or mean, they are just plainly cruel. They seem to care little about the pain they cause others, as long as their own lives are satisfactory. Sometimes, I find myself wishing they would experience the consequences of their actions because now it feels like their negative karma is finally catching up with them. I can't help but wish the worst for them, especially after what they put me through today. That kind of behavior was simply unforgivable. In an update, I want to share that I've been busy with work and other responsibilities, which is why I haven't been active lately. I truly appreciate all the kind words I've received, they mean a lot. I am doing much better now and have also started attending therapy to help me process and deal with my emotions. I realized that the things I had been going through were not normal. Just because I had faced them for so long didn't mean they were acceptable. I've also been feeling a lot of stress about my future. I feared it would make me physically sick if I continued down this path. Thanks to my best friend and her dad, they encouraged me to start therapy, and I am genuinely grateful for that support. They also connected me with their lawyer when they visited about 3 weeks ago. We are currently in the process of filing a restraining order against my parents, and the plan is to legally separate myself from them for good in the long run. 3 weeks ago, when my best friend and her dad came to see me right after my parents' visit, I was an emotional wreck. Their presence was a great comfort to me. Her dad assured me that I didn't need to worry as long as I had their support. He even mentioned that I was as good as his own daughter now. My best friend doesn't have a mother, she passed away shortly after my friend was born. Despite that, they both made me feel loved and accepted, something I desperately needed during such a chaotic time in my life. They mentioned that if she were ever to have a sister, I would be the kind of person they would expect her to be. This statement resonated deeply with me, providing a comforting sense of belonging that I desperately needed. It helped ease the guilt I had been carrying around for a long time. They reassured me that I was not a burden to them, in fact, I never had been. They expressed their unwavering support and made it clear that they were more than happy to stand by my side during this challenging time. I took the step of speaking with their lawyer, and the following day, circumstances required that both her dad and the lawyer return to their respective work commitments. However, my best friend chose to stay with me for a few days, and those moments turned into a much-needed escape. We filled those days with laughter and fun, allowing me to momentarily forget about the complexities of my family situation. Her presence brought a lightness that I hadn't felt in a long time. She was also the one who encouraged me to seek professional help, urging me to look for therapists in my area. Not only did she push me to explore my options, but she also took the initiative to help me schedule my very first session. Since then, I have committed to attending therapy twice a week. Although I acknowledge that I still have a long journey ahead of me before I feel completely okay, I recognize that this is a vital first step toward healing. My family has not attempted to contact me since our last encounter, but to ensure my safety and peace of mind, we are proceeding with the process of filing a restraining order against them. Trusting them again feels impossible, and I no longer feel safe in their presence. However, amidst these challenges, I find myself feeling grateful for the support I do have and remain hopeful that my circumstances will improve moving forward. Now, shifting to the next story, I decided to surprise my girlfriend with ice cream, but this sweet gesture took a shocking turn when I caught her in bed with another man. It's important to share that I had been in a loving relationship with this amazing woman for about 2 years. She meant everything to me, and we had always been inseparable, two peas in a pod. Our weekends were often filled with plans, and we traveled frequently, making it essential to have our arrangements set well in advance. Several months ago, she unexpectedly canceled our plans for a weekend trip, which took me by surprise. She informed me that she would be attending a party with her friends instead. I understood that life happens, so I told her I would pick her up whenever she needed and wished her a great time, looking forward to hearing from her at the end of the night. When the evening came to a close, instead of the anticipated call for me to pick her up, I received a text saying she would be spending the night with a friend. I responded with kindness, wishing her a restful night. When we finally reunited a week later, something felt off. My instincts were screaming at me, as she seemed distracted, avoiding eye contact while we were having dinner. Concerned, I asked her if everything was all right or if there was anything I could do to help, but she insisted that she was fine and simply wanted to go home. It was clear that something was troubling her, but she kept it hidden, leaving me feeling helpless. In the weeks that followed, more of our plans were suddenly cancelled, often replaced with her spending time with friends for drinks. I tried to join her on one of these outings, but she pushed back, claiming I would be bored and encouraging me to find something else to do. This only heightened my concern. It felt like a pattern that was becoming increasingly alarming. My instincts were on high alert, and I could sense that something was not right in our relationship. A week later, she cancelled our plans yet again, telling me she would be at the farmer's market with a friend. She mentioned that we could meet later that evening, but I felt an overwhelming urge to investigate what was really going on. I arrived at the market without informing her of my presence, determined to find out the truth. Once there, I searched everywhere but couldn't locate her. I sent a message letting her know I was at the market too, prompting an immediate flurry of questions from her. She inquired about where I parked, which direction I was in, and what shop I was near. After providing her the details, moments later, she appeared in front of me, wearing perfume, something she never usually wore. I felt a knot in my stomach as I asked about her friends, hoping to greet them, but she casually said that they had all left to get lunch. At that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she was not telling me. Her friends all left to get lunch, and I found myself reflecting on a situation that had been bothering me. I turned to Reddit for some advice, asking how I could uncover the truth about my girlfriend's behavior. My mind raced with questions. Was I imagining things, or was there really something off in our relationship? I worried that I was reading into things that weren't there. To update everyone who had offered their advice, I want to express my gratitude. Some thoughts resonated with me, and I found them helpful. Now, let me share the story, as it feels therapeutic to put it all down. This all unfolded just a few days ago, and it took time for me to process everything that happened. A lot of the advice I received encouraged me to confront her directly, to ask her what was really going on between us. After many ignored phone calls and text messages, she finally picked up her phone. She apologized, claiming her phone died unexpectedly and she didn't realize it until it was too late. I immediately wanted to address the message she had sent me earlier, where she casually mentioned that she wasn't feeling it between us. During our conversation, she explained that she was going through a lot of stress and was taking it out on me, which I tried to understand. Stress can indeed weigh heavily on anyone. Then I shifted my focus to an important topic. A friend of hers had mentioned to me that she might be seeing someone else, so I asked her what was going on. I needed to know if we were heading toward a breakup. Her response was quite alarmed. She exclaimed, "Oh my God, who said that? I'm so tired of all these rumors about me." Her reaction caught me off guard, as she seemed more troubled by the rumor than by the accusation itself. As she went on about how exhausting it was to deal with these claims, she repeatedly assured me that she did not want to break up. Yet, she also made me feel guilty, suggesting that my questioning showed a lack of trust. Suddenly, I felt terrible for even considering that she could be seeing someone else. She pressed me to tell her who had spread this information, but I stood my ground and refused to reveal the source. In the end, she said she was having an emotionally stressful day and needed to relax, suggesting we could talk more later in the week. With the weight of all this on my mind, I felt a mix of anxiety and guilt. I was left questioning whether there was indeed something wrong with our relationship while simultaneously feeling awful for accusing my girlfriend of infidelity. I loved her dearly and couldn't shake the feeling that I had created a rift between us. Compelled to make things right, I decided I needed to apologize in person. I hopped into my car and made the hour-long drive to her city, stopping to pick up a quart of her favorite chocolate ice cream as a peace offering. However, fate had a different course in mind. When I arrived at the ice cream shop, I unexpectedly ran into her daughter, who was there with her boyfriend after their night classes. They were both in college and looking for a treat. We exchanged pleasantries, and her daughter mentioned she needed to stop by the house to grab a workbook before heading to her boyfriend's place for the night. After chatting, her boyfriend left, and we both drove to my girlfriend's house. I pulled into the street since her unit had assigned parking, and her daughter accidentally parked behind me instead of in her own spot. As we walked up to the door, I joked about taking her parking spot again. But then, something in the way she responded, her tone or perhaps the sigh, made my heart drop. A sinking feeling washed over me, and I feared what we might discover. When we entered the house, we stilled immediately in the entryway, hearing unmistakable sounds coming from the bedroom. Rhythmic thumping and soft moans filled the air, punctuated by little exclamations of pleasure. I glanced over at her daughter, who looked wide-eyed and shocked. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped. At that moment, I felt as if I was outside of my body, watching everything unfold like it was happening to someone else. Words failed me, and I didn't know how to react. All I could do was stand there, frozen, as reality crashed down around me. I found myself in a situation that I never expected, feeling completely lost and confused. There I was, standing awkwardly in the living room holding a tub of ice cream, all while my girlfriend was in the bedroom with someone else. My mind raced as I struggled to figure out what to do next. It was as if my body was frozen, not knowing how to react. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a loud scream from her daughter, which sounded like a bizarre mix of a whale's call and a fire truck siren. It was alarming. My girlfriend burst out of the bedroom, alarmed and bare, possibly driven by a mother's instinct to check on her child, thinking something was wrong. As she rushed into the room, her expression shifted from concern to shock as she spotted me standing there alongside her daughter. Words stumbled from her lips. "Oh my God, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. What are you doing here?" She repeated this frantic question over and over until she darted back into the bedroom, clearly overwhelmed. Meanwhile, I remained frozen in place, completely stunned as if I was watching everything happen from a distance. Time seemed to lose its meaning, seconds felt like hours as I stood there, grappling with the situation. A moment later, she returned, now dressed in her pajamas, speaking urgently to whoever was in the other room. At that point, her ex started yelling at both her daughter and me, demanding to know why we were in her house. It was as if the reality of the situation began crashing down on her. I could see her face crumple as she started crying and making sounds that were too painful to understand. Her daughter shouted back, clearly furious, asking how she could betray us again. It felt like too much to bear. I could no longer look at her, the numbness spread through me, and every sound became muffled, almost echoing in my ears. I walked over to the kitchen table and placed the ice cream down gently, saying, "I know you get hungry after, so here's some ice cream." After saying that, I simply walked out the door. I could hear her sobbing behind me, pleading for me to stay, but my feet kept moving until I reached my car and drove home. This all happened a few days ago. The next day, I didn't go to work. My phone was inundated with messages, but I chose not to reply. I have kept some of those messages that overflowed with emotion, hoping to comprehend the situation better. They read things like, "If we had spent more time together, it wouldn't have happened," and, "It doesn't mean anything, you know that I love you." There were more messages pleading with me, asking why I was ignoring her and expressing that if I cared, we could work this out. It felt overwhelming, like an avalanche of emotions. Right now, I still feel a strange numbness. I find it hard to wrap my head around how or why this happened. I put my heart and soul into our relationship, supporting her and her family through tough times, trying to build a good life together. It's frustrating to realize that it didn't seem to matter. Deep down, I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm not enough, that I'm unable to make someone happy. I understand that with time, I will heal, but the pain is real. I struggle with so many unanswered questions. I wish I could reach out and ask her why things turned out this way, but I am forcing myself to avoid any contact and instead focus on moving forward. In hindsight, as trivial as it may sound, I wish I had just kept the ice cream.